Let's talk about three things. In order to build on purpose, you got to do three things. You have to define your purposes, you have to communicate your purposes, and you have to apply your purposes. Define them, communicate them, and apply and organize around the purposes of God. So let's talk about first defining. How many of you who are guests are in a new church, in a church plant? Can I see your hands? All right, God bless you guys. Those of you who are in a church plant, the first step in planting a new church is to define the purposes. All right, you got to do that. Okay. How many of you are in an existing church? All right. The first step in reviving a plateaued or declining church is to redefine the purposes. Either way, it's your first step. Growing churches have a clear-cut identity. They have a reason for being. They understand who they are. They understand who they're not. They know exactly what God has called them to do. They know exactly what God has not called them to do. It's crystal clear. They know what's my business and they know what's none of my business. However, if you ask the typical church member, what is the purpose of the church? If you went home to your church, and even if you asked at Saddleback, what's the purpose of the church? You'd get a lot of different answers. You get a lot of different answers. In fact, there was a survey done of this. There was a national survey done of 1,000 church members across the board of different denominations, and they asked people, what is the purpose of your church? And here's what they said. 89% of the members of all these different churches said, the purpose of the church is to take care of me, my family, and our needs. And 11% said, of members in the typical church said, the purpose of the church is to win the world to Christ. Right? So then they went and asked the pastors of those exact same churches, what's the purpose of your church? And the answers were the opposite. And 10% of the pastors said, our job is to take care of members' needs. And 90% of the pastors said, our job is to win the world to Christ. Is there any wonder why we have conflict in our church? If you can't even get the members and the pastors to agree on why we exist. If you're not on the same page, if you're not rowing the boat, you're rocking the boat. And if you get everybody rowing the boat, they'll stop rocking it. Conflict is a sign that you don't have clear purposes in your church. If you can't agree on that. So the foundation for balanced, healthy growth is a clearly defined purpose. Now, before I show you how, let me quickly show you why. And here are 5 reasons why you need to take the time to do this. Why is it important to define your purposes of your church? And I'll show you how to do it, but first let's talk about why. 5 reasons. Number 1, it builds morale. It builds morale. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians 1:10, let there be real harmony so there won't be any splits in the church. Be of one mind, united in thought and purpose. One of the reasons why Saddleback Church is so large is we've never had a church split. Do you know how rare it is for a church to be 36 years old and have not had people split out of it? Why? Why didn't they split? Because from the very beginning, they're taught in every membership class, nobody's allowed to join this church until they've gone through the membership class. And in the membership class, we clearly delineate, here are the 5 purposes of our church. And they're taught before they're allowed to join. A common purpose reduces conflict, and it provides unity. The Bible tells us in Galatians 4:18, it's fine to be zealous provided the purpose is good. Proverbs 29, verse 18, where there is no vision, the people what? Perish. I say where there's no vision, the people go to another parish. Most churches just limp along from week to week, Sunday to Sunday, barely surviving, and nothing is more discouraging to a congregation than having no reason to exist. Now listen to me real closely. Programs do not motivate your people. Purposes do. Programs do not motivate your people to your church. It's the purpose. People are looking for meaning. We're done in information. We have way too much information in the world and not enough meaning. not enough purpose. People don't want any more information, they don't want any more programs. What they want is meaning and purpose. Now, if your church is discouraged, the first step is to reclaim the vision by going back to why do we do what we do? Help people rediscover the purpose of the church. It builds morale. It builds morale. Nothing motivates like having a clear purpose. Number two, second reason you need to do what I'm going to teach you to do. It reduces frustration. Knowing the purpose of your church, your ministry position, your staff position, your team, knowing the purpose reduces frustration. Now, Isaiah says in Isaiah 26:3, "You, Lord, give perfect peace to those who keep their purpose firm." The church does not have time to do everything. Everybody agree with that? We don't have time to do everything. Here's the good news. God doesn't expect you to do everything. And more than that, there are only a few things worth doing in the first place anyway. Now, when you develop a purpose statement for your group, your church, your ministry, your staff, when you have a purpose statement, it not only defines what you're going to do, but it also says what you're not going to do. Because if it's not in the list of do, then we don't do it. There are thousands of things Saddleback Church does not do. Others do them. Other churches do, but we don't do them. Why? Because they're not in our purpose statement. What's our business and what's none of our business? It really comes down to that. James chapter 1, verse 8. The double-minded man can never keep a steady course. Okay? What is he saying there? Trying to lead a church without a clear purpose is like trying to drive in a heavy fog. You can't see where you're going. One of the benefits of having a clear purpose statement is it makes decision-making easier. And anytime something comes up, let's try this event, let's try this program, you simply stop and ask one question. Will this fulfill one of the purposes of our church? If it does, then we're probably going to do it. We might then ask, what's the most effective way? But does it fulfill a purpose of our church? If it doesn't, we don't do it. So it doesn't even have to be voted on or talked about or discussed. You always have to define your roles before you set your goals. Lots of churches set goals but have not defined roles. They have not defined their purposes. Now, without a purpose for your church, without a clear purpose statement, you're going to end up feeling like Isaiah did in Isaiah 49:4, where Isaiah says this, "I've labored to no purpose, and I've spent my strength in vain and for nothing." Okay? And a lot of people feel that way about ministry. I've labored to no purpose. I'm worn out, but what have I accomplished? It builds morale. It reduces frustration. Number three, the third reason you need a purpose statement, it allows concentration. It allows concentration. In Philippians 3:13, Paul says, "I'm bringing all my energies to bear on this one thing." That's focus. Forgetting the past and looking back toward what lies ahead. Okay? He says, I'm very, very focused here. When you have a clear purpose, it keeps your priorities straight. It keeps you from majoring on the minors. Did you know that when light is diffused, it doesn't really have that much effect on you? Like the sun, if it's diffused by fog, it doesn't have as much effect. The more concentrated it has, if you take a magnifying glass and you focus the power of the sun, you can light grass on fire. Or as some of us did as little boys, burn bugs. The more you focus it, the more power it has. And if you focus that light even more, it becomes a laser. And laser can cut through steel. A laser can kill a cancer. If you don't get anything else I say in this session, get this. Focus is the key to an effective life. The more you focus your life, the more you focus your church, the more you know your purpose, the more effective you're going to be. You don't want to be diffused. You want to be a laser. The truth is, listen to me, most churches are trying to do too much. I believe that the average church could probably cut out 25, 35% of everything they do, and they'd actually be healthier. I'm not here to tell you to do more. I'm here to tell you to discern your purpose and focus on that. The focused life is the key life. Most churches waste their energy on trivial things, and it all looks nice, but it's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. It looks real nice and organized, but the ship's going down. You can be efficient without being effective. Efficiency is doing things right. Effectiveness is doing the right thing. A lot of churches are efficient, but they're not effective. They're not focused. They're not purpose-driven. They don't get up in the morning and go, this is what we're doing, and we're not doing that. And they stay focused on it. The church that forgets the ultimate is going to be a slave to the immediate. And you become addicted to the tyranny of the urgent. Having a clear purpose allows concentration. It reduces frustration. It builds morale. Number 4, it attracts cooperation. It attracts cooperation. What I discovered pretty early on at Saddleback is that people want to join the church that knows where it is going. Are you eager to get on board on a bus that you don't know where that bus is headed? No. Have you ever boarded a wrong plane? I've got a friend named Brett who did that one time. He thought he was coming home. He ended up in Charlotte. Okay. Yeah. Find out the destination before it takes off, because bailing out later is painful. So, the people told Ezra in Ezra 10, verse 4, tell us how to proceed in setting things straight, and we will fully cooperate. They said, just show us the direction. Show us where to go, and we're on board. People don't cooperate when they don't know where I'm going, or where you're going, or where your church is going. Paul told the Philippians in Philippians 1:5, you have helped me in the work of the gospel. Why? Because he was clear. The Philippians church was attracted to Paul's vision. They wanted to help. The Bible says in Proverbs 11:27, in the Good News Translation, if your goals are good, you will be respected. So you want your church to be respected in the community? Be purpose-driven. Know what your goals are. Know what your vision is. Know what your purposes are. Know what your roles are. Clearly identify your purposes. And I highly recommend, if you don't have one, we're going to teach you how to do this. Start a membership class. And for those of you who are staff at Saddleback, I want you to understand how important class 101, 201, 301, and 401 is. If we didn't have class 101, 201, 301, 401, we wouldn't be 1/10 of the church that we are today. Class is the most important thing we do in this church. It's more important than the weekend service. You heard it right. It's more important than the weekend service, because it's what turns people from come and see into come and die, from attenders into members, and from consumers into contributors, and from spectators into participators. And churches that don't have a system for moving people through that, they have a church full of attenders. They have a church full of spectators. They have a church full of people who watch, not make it happen. And so I would say you clearly identify your purposes in your membership class. And you tell people up front where you're headed. Because you know what it does? It keeps people from joining with false assumptions. Not everybody wants to join your church. Do you want to join your church? Anybody learned that one yet? Yeah. Not everybody wants to join. Do you want to join? And you want to weed out those with hidden agendas. Those of you pastors, God loves you, and everybody else has a wonderful plan for your church. And they'll be glad to sell it to you. If you are accepting members into your church, into your congregation, without clearly defining the purposes in advance, you are asking for trouble. Especially those who transfer in from other churches, because they've got their agenda. I had to face this before we had a first service of Saddleback Church. I told you I started this service with a church with just K in my home. And when we found one family, and they started meeting with us, and we found another, and we found another, and we grew to about 15 people in the first 12 weeks. And I remember as we were making plans for the first service, there was a guy in our church, in that original 15, who had been a long-term member at another great church here in Orange County called Calvary Chapel. I've got nothing against Calvary Chapel. It's a great church. Chuck Smith died a couple years ago. I went to his funeral. We were friends. I'd flown with him on a plane together. We'd spoken at conferences together, so I had nothing against Calvary Chapel, but just different styles. But Paul had gone to that church for a long time, and in every single planning meeting he goes, now at Calvary Chapel we did it like this. And we start planning something else for our first service of Saddleback. Now at Calvary Chapel we did it like this, and another, and now at Calvary Chapel we did it like this. Now at Calvary Chapel, finally on about the 7th or 8th time I go, hey, Paul, hang on. Calvary Chapel's only 13 minutes away. If you want to go there, go. And he left. Oops. And he had a family of 5, and I only had 15 people. 1/3 of my church left. That's what you call church decline, and we hadn't even had the first service yet. And he was a tither. I look back now and think that's one of the smartest decisions I ever made in my life. You cannot surrender the agenda of your church to whiners. If you do, your ship will never get out of the harbor. Some of you, that's all you needed to hear. Go home, okay? That's it. Conference is over for you. That's all you needed to hear. All right. You can't let other people set the agenda. Jesus sets the agenda. I don't set it. You don't set it. Jesus determines the purposes and the direction of the church. That makes sense? And so the best time to get rid of uncooperative members is before they join. And that is by saying, here's where we are. We're not saying this is the only way to do it, but this is we're saying this is what God has called us to do. And if you don't want to go with us, this is where we're going. You probably don't want to join us. Some of you, before you start having additions in your church, are going to have some blessed subtractions. How many people had to die in the desert before God let them go into the promised land? Yeah, a generation. Except Caleb and Joshua. All right, so the best time to get rid of uncooperative members is before they join. Now, anytime there's something I really want you to get, I'll say, get it, and you say, got it, and I'll say, good, okay? So never let somebody join without understanding the purposes first. Get it? Got it. Good. All right, number 5. The 5th reason it's important to define your purpose, it assists evaluation. It assists evaluation. 2 Corinthians 13:5 says, examine yourself to see whether you're in the faith. Test yourselves. God tells us over and over again we are to test, we are to examine, we are to evaluate where we're headed. Now, how do you do that? Well, your purposes are your standards on which you evaluate your progress and your growth. Are we doing what we ought to be doing? I said it earlier, but I'm going to say it again. There are really only 2 questions when it comes to church growth. What is the business that we're in? And number 2, how's business? That's it. Those are the 2 questions you want to ask. What's our business as a church? And 2, how's business?